Maybe God never ignored you. Maybe you just grew up too much to need him to answer. There is a kind of loneliness that no one teaches you to name. It is not the absence of people around you. It's not the lack of someone who loves you. It's something much deeper, much quieter. It's the feeling that you're screaming at the universe, and the universe has turned its back on you. You pray, you beg, you bargain. You promise to be better, to do things differently, to change completely if only he would give you a sign, anything to prove that you're not alone in this darkness. And what do you get? Nothing. Silence. A void so heavy that it physically hurts in your chest. And then comes the guilt. Is it because I don't have enough faith? Did I do something wrong? Did he abandon me because I don't deserve to be heard? You start to replay every decision, every failure, every moment when you weren't the person you promised to be. And the more you search for answers, the more the silence intensifies. This pain has a name. It's the silence of God, or of the universe if you prefer. It's when you realize that you may be completely alone in your own existence, that perhaps no one, neither in the heights nor in the depths, is really paying attention. And that possibility is terrifying because it destroys the only thing that keeps us going. The illusion that someone, somewhere, cares enough to intervene. The worst part is that no one talks about it openly. You go to church, to the temple, to prayer groups, and everyone is sharing testimonies of how God answered, how he was faithful, how he never fails. And you sit there surrounded by these radiant people, feeling like an imposter, because you have no testimony to share. You have only emptiness, and the shame of admitting that maybe you are the problem, the exception, the one who has been left behind. You try harder. You pray more intensely. You fast. You read books about faith. You look for verses that promise that God always answers those who seek him. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. But you knock and the door remains locked. You seek and find only more questions. And each unfulfilled promise erodes your hope a little more until you reach that dangerous place where you can no longer even believe that there is anyone on the other side. But what if I told you that you're asking the wrong question? That the silence that terrifies you may be the most honest and most necessary thing you've ever received. Because maybe the problem isn't that God isn't answering. Maybe it's that you're still waiting for him to do the work that only you can do. Maybe the silence isn't rejection. Maybe it's the greatest vote of confidence you could receive. There is something deeply lonely about feeling that your prayers die in the air. You close your eyes, fold your hands, whisper or shout the words you learned as a child. And when you open your eyes, nothing has changed. The problem is still there. The pain remains intact. The doubt continues to gnaw at you inside. And you ask yourself, is he listening to me? Or am I just talking to myself? The worst part isn't even the silence itself. It's the shame that comes with it. Because you look around and it seems like everyone else can feel God. Your social media feeds are full of people sharing miracles, signs, divine messages that arrived at just the right moment. God spoke to me today. I felt his presence so clearly. I got the answer I needed. And you? You feel nothing. You pray. And it's like sending a message that stays forever in sent, never in read. And then begins that silent spiral that no one admits out loud. You begin to doubt not only God but yourself. Do I not know how to pray properly? Is my faith too weak? Is there something fundamentally wrong with me? Because if God answers others and doesn't answer you, the obvious conclusion is that the problem lies with you, not him. This loneliness has a specific texture. It's not like feeling alone in a room full of people. That's bearable, because you know you can leave. But when you feel cosmically alone, when even the sky seems empty, there is no way out. There is nowhere to go that will solve this. It's you and the emptiness. And the emptiness doesn't blink, doesn't respond, doesn't move. Kierkegaard, a 19th century Danish philosopher, called this despair. But not the despair of someone who has lost something. The despair of someone who realizes that they are irretrievably alone in their own existence. He said that true despair is not crying out for help and not being rescued. It is realizing that there may be no one on the other side to hear the cry. It is when the very structure of meaning collapses, and you are left floating in nothingness. And look, you may be the most rational person in the world. You may even doubt the existence of God on an intellectual level. But that does not protect you from this loneliness. Because deep down, what you are looking for is not necessarily God as a religious entity. What you seek is meaning. It's the confirmation that your life matters, that your choices have weight, that you're not just rolling dice in the dark, hoping that something will make sense by chance. You want someone, God, the universe, fate, whatever, to say to you, I see you, I hear you, you are not alone, your pain has a purpose, your questions have answers. But what you get is silence. And the more you beg for a sign, the more deafening the silence becomes. Then you start bargaining. Okay, God, I don't need a giant miracle. Just give me something small, a discreet sign. anything that shows me you're there. And you become obsessed with looking for patterns, coincidences, hidden messages. That song that played at just the right moment. That phrase someone said that seemed meant for you. That number that keeps appearing. You grab at these crumbs of meaning as if they were lifelines in the middle of the ocean. But deep down you know you're forcing meaning where there may be none. And that's even more lonely, because now you're not only not getting answers, you've started making them up. And making up your own answers to pretend you're not alone is the saddest form of loneliness there is. And there are days when you reach a point of such deep exhaustion that you can't even pray anymore. Not because you're angry at God, but because you just can't take it anymore. You can't stand talking to emptiness anymore. You can't stand feeling like you're begging for attention from the one who created you but seems to have forgotten you in a drawer. You give up, not out of rebellion, but out of exhaustion. And it is there, at that point of total surrender, that something strange happens. Despair changes form. You stop waiting for answers and begin to realize something disturbing. What if the silence is intentional? What if it's not abandonment but method? What if God, or the universe, or life, is silent precisely because you need to stop asking questions and start living the answers? But that's too terrifying to face right now, because it would mean that you may never receive the confirmation you're looking for, that you may have to make decisions without guarantees, that you may in fact be much more alone than you'd like to admit. And before you face that, you need to understand where this desperate need to have someone answering you all the time comes from, because you've been conditioned to expect answers. Since childhood, you've been taught that God works like a cosmic version of Santa Claus. If you're good, if you pray properly, if you believe strongly enough, He will grant your wishes. It may take time. God's time is different from ours. But eventually, if you're patient and deserve it, the answer will come. It's almost an implicit contract. You do your part, He does His. But that's not faith. It's bargaining. It's a commercial transaction disguised as spirituality. And worse, it's infantilizing. Because it keeps you eternally in the position of a child waiting for validation and guidance from a parent who never lets you truly grow up. Think about it. When you were a child, you asked your parents everything. Can I do this? Should I choose that? What do I do now? And that was healthy, even necessary, because you didn't yet have the tools to make decisions on your own. But as you grew up, your parents, if they were wise, stopped answering everything. They started asking questions back. What do you think? What does your instinct tell you? Not because they didn't care anymore, but because loving you meant preparing you to live without them. Now imagine if your parents answered every question you had until you were 40. You would call them to ask what clothes to wear, what food to order at a restaurant, whether or not to send that message. It would be pathetic, right? Because you would be stuck in a dependency that should have been overcome decades ago. You wouldn't be an adult. You would be an aging child. And that's exactly what immature spirituality does to you. It keeps you in eternal spiritual childhood, where you never develop existential autonomy because you always have someone to outsource your decisions, your fears, your responsibilities to. God will show me the way. God will give me a sign. God will solve it. Kierkegaard had a term for this: Christianity, which he differentiated from Christianity. Christianity is religion as social comfort, as emotional life insurance, as a crutch so you don't have to face the void. True Christianity, or any mature faith really, is what he called a leap of faith. You jump into the abyss without a safety net, without guarantees, without bright signs telling you that everything will be okay. You jump because you choose to jump, not because someone promised you there's ground on the other side. But modern society has made this even worse, because we live in the age of instant gratification. Want information? Google responds in 0.3 seconds. Want food? An app delivers it in 30 minutes. Want validation? Post a photo and the likes start rolling in. Everything is immediate, measurable, guaranteed. And then you take that same expectation to your spiritual and emotional life, and you get desperate when God doesn't work like Alexa. Hey God, should I take this job? Silence. Hey God, should I end this relationship? Silence. Hey God, what is the meaning of my life? Silence. And you panic because your brain has been trained to expect quick, clear answers delivered on a silver platter. The idea that you might have to figure it out for yourself, through trial and error, through years of reflection and experience, that's unbearable. You want the shortcut. You want the ready-made answer. You want someone else to take responsibility for you. And look how convenient that is, because if God gives you the answer, you're never wrong. If it goes wrong, it was God's will. If it went right, God guided me. You never have to take full responsibility for your own choices. You always have a cosmic alibi. But what if God, or life, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, doesn't answer precisely because he has already given you everything you need? What if the silence is him saying, "You already know the answer. Stop using me as an excuse for your own cowardice in making a decision"? Because let's face it, how many times have you asked God for a sign when deep down you already knew exactly what you needed to do? You just wanted him to give you permission so you wouldn't have to face the consequences alone. You knew you needed to end that toxic relationship, but you wanted God to send you a clear sign so you could say, "It wasn't me, it was God who decided." You knew you needed to change jobs, leave that city, cut off that friendship, but you waited for a divine epiphany because it was easier than assuming that you are the one in control and you are the one who will bear the consequences. God's silence forces you to grow. It forces you to leave the comfortable position of the eternal child waiting for daddy to solve everything. It forces you to face a brutal truth. You are an existential adult now, and adults make decisions in the dark, without guarantees, without maps, without bright signs. And that's terrifying, because it means you can make mistakes. You can choose the wrong path. You can fall flat on your face, and no one, not God, not the universe, will save you from the consequences. You'll have to live with your choices, and worse, you'll have to make new choices even though you know you might make mistakes again. But you know what's even more terrifying? Realizing that maybe the universe doesn't work with ready-made answers, because life isn't a multiple choice test where only one alternative is right. Maybe there are multiple possible paths, and what matters isn't choosing the right one, but choosing and making it work. Building meaning from the choice, not waiting for meaning to come before it. But that completely destroys the fantasy that has been sold to you since childhood. The fantasy that there is a perfect divine plan for your life, and your only mission is to discover what it is and follow it. What if there is no plan? What if there is only life, chaotic, uncertain, absurd, and you are responsible for creating your own plans, your own meanings, your own answers? This possibility is not only scary, it is liberating and terrifying at the same time, because it takes away all your crutches, but it also gives you all the power. You are no longer a hostage to answers that never come, but you also have no one else to blame when everything falls apart. And that's where the question you're most afraid to ask comes in. What if God doesn't answer because the universe simply owes you no answers? So let's talk about the truth that no one wants to hear. What if the universe really doesn't owe you any answers? Not because you're not important, not because your pain isn't real, but simply because the cosmos doesn't work like customer service. It has no obligation to make sense to you. It has no commitment to justify your tragedies, explain your losses, or validate your suffering with a cute purpose wrapped in spiritual gift paper. Albert Camus, French philosopher of the absurd, spent his entire life chewing on this bitter truth. He said that the human condition is fundamentally absurd. Not absurd in the sense of ridiculous, but absurd in the philosophical sense. There is a tragic mismatch between our desperate need for meaning and the universe's complete indifference to providing it. You want answers. The universe doesn't have them. You want justice. The universe doesn't care. You want your pain to mean something, your sacrifices to be worthwhile, a greater reason behind every tear shed. And the universe? The universe simply is. It spins, expands, contracts, swallows stars, and spits out cosmic dust, completely oblivious to the fact that you are down there, on your knees, begging for a sign. And look, this is not a nihilistic or depressive view, it's just honest, brutally honest. Because what Camus realized is that once you accept the absurd, that life has no intrinsic meaning, you have three options. The first is suicide, not necessarily physical, but existential. You give up, you stop searching, you accept that nothing matters and surrender to the void. It's total surrender. The second is what he called philosophical suicide. You create an artificial faith, a comforting illusion, a beautiful lie that protects you from the absurd. You convince yourself that there is a divine plan, even without any evidence. You choose fantasy because reality is unbearable. But Camus proposed a third way, revolt. You look absurdity in the eye, recognize that the universe owes you nothing, that perhaps there is no meaning waiting to be discovered, and yet you choose to live, not despite absurdity, but with absurdity. You rebel against the lack of meaning by creating your own meaning. You become the author of your own existence, not the reader of a divine script. Think of the myth of Sisyphus, which Camus loved to use as a metaphor. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push a giant rock up a mountain, only to see it roll back down eternally. It is the perfect image of absurdity, effort without purpose, work without reward, suffering without meaning. And Camus ends his essay with a disturbing sentence. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy? How on earth can anyone be happy in such a situation? Because Sisyphus stopped waiting for the gods to change his sentence. He stopped begging for a meaning that would never come. He accepted that the stone will always roll back down, that there is no cosmic redemption waiting at the top of the mountain, and chose to find dignity in the very act of pushing. The stone has no meaning, but he pushes it anyway, and in this silent revolt against the absurd, he becomes free. Now apply this to your life. You are waiting for God or the universe or fate to give you a reason to continue, a guarantee that it will be worth it, a sign that your efforts will be rewarded, that your pain has a purpose, that in the end everything will fit into a beautiful narrative where you understand perfectly why you went through each thing. But what if that guarantee never comes? What if you spend your whole life waiting and die without ever receiving the answer? You will have wasted your only existence begging for approval from a heaven that may be empty. Or you can do what Sisyphus did. Accept that maybe the universe really is indifferent, that maybe there is no plan, that maybe your pain has no cosmic meaning. And even so, precisely because of that, choose to live with such intensity, such passion, such commitment to what you believe is right, that you create the meaning that the universe refused to give you. This is not giving up on God. It is growing beyond the childish need to have a God who functions as emotional life insurance. It is maturing to the point of understanding that if God exists, He is probably not a cosmic relationship manager solving your problems. He is something much greater, much more mysterious, much quieter than you would like. And do you know what terrible freedom comes with that? You realize that you never needed divine permission to do the right thing. You never needed a sign from heaven to be kind, generous, courageous. You always had moral autonomy. You could always choose love over hate, compassion over indifference, courage over cowardice. You just wanted someone to validate your choices before you made them. But validation is not a requirement for action. It never has been. So maybe God's silence is not cruelty. Maybe it's the greatest vote of confidence possible. He's saying, you already know what to do. You no longer need me to approve every step. You've grown up. Now go live. But there is still a deeper layer to all this. Because there is a very ancient mystical tradition that has known this brutal truth for centuries and called God's silence not abandonment, but initiation. In the 16th century, a Spanish mystic named John of the Cross described something he called the dark night of the soul. It wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was a raw, almost clinical account of a devastating spiritual phenomenon, the moment when God simply disappears from the experience of those who sought Him most fervently. John was not talking about casual doubt or a passing crisis of faith. He was describing an absolute, total emptiness where all spiritual consolations evaporate. You no longer feel the divine presence. Your prayers seem to hit a concrete wall. The rituals that once comforted you are now mechanical, empty, almost offensive in their uselessness. It's as if God had gone on vacation without telling you and taken all the light in the world with Him. And do you know what John said about this? That it wasn't punishment. It was purification. It was God loving you so radically that He refused to be just your emotional painkiller. The silence was the last gift He could give you, the chance to find out if you loved Him for Himself or just for the comfort He provided. Think about it. While God answers you, while you feel His presence, while the signs come and the prayers are answered, you never really know why you're there. You may just be addicted to the feeling of being cared for, to the spiritual dopamine rush of feeling special, chosen, heard. You may be using God as an emotional crutch, as a divine self-help app, as an escape valve so you don't have to face your own existential loneliness. But when all that disappears, when there is no more consolation, no more signs, no more sense of presence, then you discover your real motivation. Do you stay there? Do you continue to pray even without an answer? Do you continue to serve, love, seek even without any emotional reward? Or do you give up because in the end you were there for what you could receive, not for what you could give? Mother Teresa of Calcutta experienced this in a brutal way. For almost 50 years, 50, she did not feel God's presence. Nothing. Complete emptiness. And she wrote about it in private letters that were only revealed after her death. She described a terrible silence, a darkness that surrounded her on all sides. She felt abandoned, forgotten, as if God had turned His back on her specifically. And you know what she did? She kept going. She got up every day, put on her white habit, went out into the streets of Calcutta and cared for the dying, the lepers, the abandoned children. She fed the hungry without feeling God. She embraced the sick without any spiritual consolation. She smiled for the photographers and bore witness to a faith that, internally, seemed dead. And here's the crucial point. She didn't do this expecting God to respond again. She did it because she had chosen to do it, regardless of the response. Her love was no longer conditional on the divine presence. It was a mature, autonomous love that existed for its own sake. She had gone through the fire of the dark night and come out the other side transformed, No longer a spiritual child waiting for divine affection, but a woman who could love without guarantees. This is what John of the Cross called purification. God hides not because he has stopped loving you, but because he loves you too much to let you be childishly dependent on him. He wants you to mature. He wants you to develop a faith that does not need signs, sensations, or constant confirmation. He wants you to become capable of choosing good love, truth, even and especially when there is no guaranteed reward. And there is a disturbing beauty in that. Because while you seek God for the comforts he gives you, you never know if you are loving God or loving yourself through God. But when he is completely silent and you are still there, then you know it's real. It's not a transaction, it's not a bargain. It's pure, selfless, mature love. Job is another devastating example of this. He lost everything: children, wealth, health, dignity. And he spent entire chapters of the biblical book demanding an explanation from God. Why? What did I do? Answer me. And he had a right to ask. He hadn't done anything wrong. He didn't deserve that suffering. It was fair to demand an answer. And when God finally appears, do you know what he does? He doesn't answer anything about the reason for Job's suffering. Nothing. Zero. He simply describes the magnitude of creation. The stars, the oceans, the wild animals, the incomprehensible immensity of the cosmos. And basically says, you think you understand anything? You can't even comprehend how a rainy day works. And you want me to explain the mysteries of existence to you? It's brutal. It's almost offensive. But Job is satisfied with that. Not with answers. With presence. He understands that God is not a teacher giving a lecture, explaining every formula in the universe. God is mystery. He is immensity. He is something infinitely greater than our questions and understanding. And sometimes the only honest answer is silence. So maybe God's silence isn't him turning his back on you. Maybe it's him inviting you to a deeper level of relationship. A level where you no longer need signs because you've learned to trust what you already know. Where you no longer need confirmation because you've developed the courage to live in uncertainty. Where you no longer need him to solve your problems because you finally accepted that growing up is learning to solve them yourself. And if you've made it this far in this video, maybe it's because you're living your own dark night. Maybe you're in the midst of this agonizing silence, wondering if God really exists or if you've wasted your whole life talking to yourself. And I'm not going to give you an easy answer because there isn't one. But I can tell you this, you are not alone in this experience. And if you want to continue exploring these profound questions about faith, doubt, and the meaning of life, leave your like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Because we're going to continue diving into these uncomfortable truths that no one else has the courage to talk about. But there's still a crucial piece missing from this story. Because all of this, Camus' Absurdity, John's Dark Night, Mother Teresa's emptiness, leads you to a final question that you don't want to ask, but need to. What does God's silence reveal about you? Because ultimately, the question isn't why doesn't God answer? The real question, the one that cuts deepest, is what are you really looking for when you ask for an answer? Do you want guidance? Or do you want someone to take responsibility for your choices? Do you want to feel the divine presence? Or do you want to numb the existential loneliness that haunts you? Do you want a sign? Or do you want an excuse not to have to trust your own judgment? God's silence acts as a relentless mirror. It exposes your real motivations, your emotional dependencies, your deepest fears. And most people can't bear to look at what the mirror shows them. Think about that relationship you keep asking God to give you clarity about whether to end or not. You already know the answer. You've known for a long time. Every time you pick up the phone to call that person, your stomach churns. Every time you think about your future with them, the image is hazy, forced, unreal. Your body has already answered you. Your intuition has already answered you. Your closest friends have already answered you. But you keep praying for a divine sign. Why? Because you don't want to take responsibility for ending it. You want God to do it for you. You want to be able to say, God showed me it wasn't meant to be, instead of I chose to end it because I wasn't happy. You want to outsource the guilt, the pain of hurting someone, the risk of being wrong. Or think about that job that sucks your soul dry but pays the bills. You beg God to show you whether you should quit or not. But you already know. You know you're slowly dying inside, that your mental health is crumbling, that you've lost the spark that made you wake up wanting to live. But you keep waiting for a heavenly sign because having a divine sign protects you from fear. What if I leave and can't find another job? What if I regret it? What if I'm throwing everything away? God's silence forces you to face this. You already have everything you need to make the decision. You're just afraid to face the consequences. And that's deeply human, but also deeply limiting. Because while you wait for external validation, divine or otherwise, you're not living. You're procrastinating. Kierkegaard had a killer line about this. Anxiety is the vertigo of freedom. When you realize that you are radically free to choose, that no one, not even God, will make the choices for you, you panic. Because total freedom is terrifying. It means you can make mistakes, you can destroy your own life, you can choose the wrong path and spend years paying for it. So you invent dependencies. You create rituals of searching for signs so you don't have to take on your frightening freedom. You flip a coin, open the Bible to a random page, interpret coincidences as divine messages, anything to avoid the truth. You are the one who decides. You always have been. And there's something else that silence reveals. Your relationship with control. Because when you beg God for an answer, what you're really asking for is predictability. You want to know how it will end before you begin. You want guarantees that you won't suffer, won't fail, won't regret it. You want the complete script before you accept the role. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. And the more you demand guarantees, the more you paralyze yourself. Because no important decision comes with a guarantee. None. You can do everything right and still get it wrong. You can choose wisely and still screw up. You can follow all the advice, all the guidance, all the spiritual laws of success and still end up broken, alone, lost. And God's silence forces you to make peace with that. It forces you to understand that to live is to take risks, that to love is to take risks, that to have faith, true faith, is to take risks. It's jumping without knowing where you'll land. It's choosing without having all the information. It's building bridges as you walk across them. And do you know what else silence exposes? Your need to feel special. Because deep down, when you ask for a divine sign, you want to be the exception. You want to be that person for whom God does something extraordinary. You want to have a miraculous story to tell, a mystical experience that sets you apart, that proves that you matter in a unique way in the cosmos. But what if you're just another one? Just another human trying to figure out how to live well, how to love well, how to die well. No special signs, no guiding stars, no manifest destiny written in the stars. Just you, your conscience, your choices, and the consequences that come with them. That hurts the ego. Because you were created believing that you are the protagonist of a cosmic narrative. But what if you are just a note in an infinite symphony? Important, yes, but not central. God's silence invites you to make peace with your own cosmic insignificance. And paradoxically, it is in this acceptance that you find true dignity. Because when you stop expecting to be special and simply commit to living with integrity, without a divine audience, without guaranteed rewards, without cosmic recognition, you become free. Free to do what is right because it is right, not because it will earn you points in heaven. Free to love without expecting the universe to reciprocate. Free to create, build, serve, even knowing that perhaps everything you do will disappear one day, swallowed up by time and oblivion. And that freedom is scary because it takes away all your crutches. But it also gives you something you never had while you were begging for divine signs, real autonomy, existential dignity, the profound feeling, perhaps for the first time in your life, that you are truly living, not just following a script that someone else wrote for you. So God's silence reveals this. You are stronger than you think, wiser than you admit, more capable than you want to believe. You were just using God as an excuse so you wouldn't have to take responsibility for your own decisions. And now that He has refused to be your excuse, you have no choice but to grow up. But you still have to face the final, most terrifying question. What if you never really get an answer? What if the silence is permanent? How do you live a good, meaningful life without ever being sure that someone is watching? So we've reached the point of no return. The question you fear most to ask, but which the silence forces you to face. How do you live well, really well, without ever being sure that someone is watching? Because that's the truth that shatters all remaining illusions. You always believed you needed an audience. God, the universe, fate, whatever you want to call it. Someone who would witness your pain and validate your efforts. Someone who would keep score, who would record every sacrifice, every act of kindness, every moment you chose the right thing over the easy thing. Because if no one is watching, if no one is counting, then what's the point? Therein lies the final illusion that silence shatters. You thought you were doing good out of kindness, but in fact you were doing it for recognition. You thought you loved for love's sake, but in fact you loved for reward. You thought you had faith, but in fact you were just afraid of being alone in the dark. And now that silence has taken away your audience, what is left? Who are you when no one is watching? What do you do when there is no heavenly scoreboard keeping track of points? How do you choose to live when there is no guarantee that your choices matter beyond this moment, this life, this microscopic breath in infinite time? Camus said that recognizing the absurd is not the end. It is the beginning. Because once you accept that the universe has no obligation to make sense to you, that God may be silent forever, that perhaps there is no plan and you are radically alone in constructing your own meaning, then you finally become free. Free from what? From dependence. from infantilization, from the pathetic need for cosmic approval. You stop living for an invisible audience and start living for integrity. Not because someone will reward you, but because you chose to be that kind of person. Period. Think of Mother Teresa again. 50 years of divine silence. 50 years feeding the hungry, embracing the dying, cleaning the wounds of lepers. And at no point did she feel God, not once. But she continued. Not because she expected him to respond again, but because she had chosen to be that kind of person, with or without a divine audience. That is mature freedom. That's when you realize that ethics don't need rewards to work. Love doesn't need guarantees to be real. Kindness doesn't need recognition to have value. You do it because that's who you've decided to be, not because someone promised to pay you for it. And that frees you from a prison you didn't even know you were living in. The prison of the transactional. You've always lived in an eternal negotiation with the divine. If I am good, he will bless me. If I pray, he will answer. If I suffer with patience, he will reward me. All your spirituality was a commercial contract disguised as faith. But when God is silent, the contract is broken. And you realize that you were treating the sacred as a heavenly bank where you deposited good deeds expecting to receive interest in the form of happiness. That is not love. That's not faith. That's commerce. And the silence forces you to choose. Do you continue when there's nothing left to gain? Because the truth is that you already knew, deep down, that doing the right thing is difficult, that truly loving hurts, that having integrity is expensive. You just hope that God would compensate for that cost with blessings, signs, miracles. But what if there is no compensation? What if you do everything right and your life is still hard, unfair, short? Do you still choose to do the right thing? That's where terrifying freedom lies. Because it means you can be absolutely good, absolutely generous, absolutely honest, and still suffer, fail, die without recognition. The universe does not guarantee justice. It does not promise that good people will end up well. It does not offer a happy ending by contract. So you have to make the most adult decision of your life. To do the right thing, knowing it might go wrong. To love knowing it might not be reciprocated. To build knowing it might crumble. To live knowing you will die, and perhaps everything you did will be forgotten. And when you make that choice, when you continue to be good even without guarantees, when you love even without security, when you build meaning even knowing that the universe can destroy it at any moment, you stop being a child. You become an existential adult, autonomous, free. Free to live without fear of divine punishment. Free to love without negotiating blessings. Free to make mistakes without thinking that God has abandoned you. Free to have horrible days without interpreting them as a sign that you did something wrong. Free to be human, flawed, incomplete, and yet still worthy. And there is something profoundly beautiful about that. Because when you do good without expecting anything in return, the good becomes pure. When you love without bargaining, love becomes real. When you build meaning knowing it can be destroyed, you are creating genuine art from life itself. You are no longer following a manual. You are no longer obeying to earn points in heaven. You are actively, consciously choosing who you want to be in this world. And that choice, that terrifying freedom to create yourself without a divine script, is what transforms you from a puppet into an author. So yes, it's terrifying. Living without guarantees always has been. But it's also the only way to truly live. Because while you wait for God to approve each step, you're not living. You're rehearsing. And life is not a rehearsal. It's the show. And the show is happening now, with or without a divine audience. And there lies the final revelation, the one you least expected. Perhaps God's silence is the greatest proof of love he could give you. Because think about it, if God continued to answer everything, validating every choice, calming every anxiety, you would never grow. You would remain eternally dependent, eternally childish, eternally incapable of taking charge of your own existence. You would be an eternal child who never matures, who never leaves home, who never discovers who he really is without the constant gaze of his parents. Silence is not abandonment. It is trust. It is God saying, you already know what to do. You already have everything you need. Now go, live, make mistakes, get it right, build, destroy, learn, but live on your own because you've grown too much for me to continue making your choices. And that changes everything because it means that when you feel empty, when your prayers seem to fall on deaf ears, when you beg for a sign and receive none, maybe it's not because God doesn't care. Maybe it's because he cares too much, because he loves you enough to let you grow, even if growing hurts. Job understood this. After all the suffering, after God finally appeared and explained nothing, Job has a surprising response. He doesn't say, now I understand why I suffered. He says something deeper. Before, I knew you only by hearsay. Now my eyes see you. Suffering did not bring answers. It brought presence. Not explanation, but encounter. And maybe that's what silence offers you. Not easy answers, but a deeper relationship. A faith that doesn't depend on signs. A love that doesn't negotiate. A trust that exists despite uncertainty, not because of certainty. You can spend your whole life waiting for God to speak, or you can realize that He has already spoken. He gave you consciousness, free will, the ability to love, to choose, to create meaning. He gave you autonomy. And now He is silent because the next part of the story is your responsibility to write. And look, that doesn't mean you're alone. It means you're free. Free to love without asking permission. Free to serve without expecting recognition. Free to build a good, meaningful life, even without anyone applauding from heaven. Because in the end, the question was never, why doesn't God answer? The question has always been, who are you when no one is answering? And the answer to that question defines everything. It defines whether you have true faith or just fear in disguise. It defines whether you truly love or just trade affection. It defines whether you truly live or just perform for an invisible audience. And when you finally make peace with the silence, something strange happens. You start to hear other things. The voice of your own intuition, which you always ignored while waiting for a divine voice. The wisdom of your body, which you always despised while searching for heavenly signs. The advice of that friend who always saw you more clearly than you saw yourself. God has always been speaking, just not through the channels you expected. He speaks through life, through the people who cross your path, through the doors that open and those that close, through the pain that teaches you empathy and the joy that teaches you gratitude. You were only deaf because you wanted a direct, customized, unmistakable message. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. So silence is also an answer. It's God saying, I've given you everything. Now use it. It's the universe saying, you already know. Now act. It's life saying, stop waiting for permission and start really living. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest miracle isn't God answering your prayers. Maybe it's you discovering that you never needed Him to answer. That you were always capable, always strong enough, always wise enough. You were just afraid to admit it because admitting it means you no longer have excuses, no one to blame, no way to outsource your own life. But when you accept it, when you stop begging for signs and start living with courage, with integrity, with genuine love, you discover something liberating. You were never alone. You just grew up too much to need someone to tell you that all the time. Because God's silence is not absence. It is maturity. It's you reaching a point in your journey where you no longer need constant validation, eternal confirmation, signs at every turn. You've learned to trust yourself. And trusting yourself is paradoxically the deepest form of trusting God. Because you finally understood that He made you capable, free, responsible. And there lies the peace you were looking for. Not in the answers that never came, but in the acceptance that maybe you don't need them. That maybe living well is just that. Doing the best you can with what you have. Loving with all you are. Building meaning where there was once emptiness. And continuing. Always continuing. Even when no one applauds. Even when no one sees. Even when the sky is silent and you feel too small in the face of immensity. Because you are not small. You never were. You are someone who looked emptiness in the eye. Felt the terror of cosmic loneliness. And still chose to love, to serve, to create. And that choice, that courage to live well without guarantees, is what makes you human in the most beautiful sense of the word. So if you are living your own silence right now, I say to you, take a deep breath. You have not been abandoned. You've just been promoted to existential adulthood. And now life is waiting to see what you will do with this terrible and beautiful freedom that is being totally responsible for yourself. And if you've made it this far in this video, it's probably because you're ready for this journey. So tell me in the comments, when was the last time you really trusted yourself without waiting for a divine sign? I want to hear your story. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit codes are ready for you. The link is in the video description. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.